Last format Virtual World was the Tier 1 deck, the combo deck. But this format Virtual World largely has fell into obscurity. A deck that has a few tops in remote duels, extravaganzas, they largely seem to not be up there anymore. Before they were everywhere. They were the tier 1 deck. Other decks were compared to Virtual World to determine whether they could even hold a candlelight in the upper echelons of the competitive scene. And Virtual World has declined. They haven't declined to the levels of Tritron where there are almost no tops, but they aren't where they were. And why is that? Why is it that a deck went from tier 1 to obscurity in a flick? And the reason that is, and the reason that others would tell you is, well, VFD got banned. VFD got banned in the March 2021 ban list. And I'm going to preempt this by saying that VFD getting banned is a partial truth. It is a factor in Virtual World's demise, but is not the whole truth. And saying that it is just because of VFD declining is almost extremely reductive. Well, I'm not going to say almost, it is. It is extremely reductive to reduce a deck that was succeeding at the level that Virtual World was and them falling into the abyss and stating that it's simply because of the removal of VFD. It's not that entirely. It's more so that the metagame has shifted. The metagame has shifted to more mid range, more control. Sure, you do have Dragon Link popping up and topping quite consistently as a combo deck, but you have to remember that Dragon Link has access to mid range kind of strats. Remember, if a Dragon Link player feels that he doesn't have the resources to continue, or he feels that doing so would put him at too much of a hindrance, he could simply just go into hieratic seals with tidying. And a lot of people may scoff at that board, but that board is exceptionally powerful. How powerful? Well, that board could perhaps counter an entire virtual world turn. How? Virtual world is reliant upon two card combos. The deck is only capable of doing two card combos. Remember that virtual world monsters only gain their effects when they target other virtual world cards, either a trap, spell, or virtual world monster. They are entirely two card reliant. In the current metagame, that is quite rare. You may not have noticed this, but almost every deck in top competitive play has access to one card combos. Now, the only deck that doesn't utilize their one card combo quite as much is Dragon Link because they can utilize the Baby Metal thing. And the Baby Metal combo has been in existence for Dragon Link since last year. But going along the lines, we have Invoked Dogmatica Shadow. Both Alistar and the Shadow Fusion are one card combos. For Tri Brigades, they have Fractal, that's their one card combo. And for decks like Prankid, well, the entire monster set is a one card combo. The point of listing these one card combos and the access that these meta decks have to the one card combos is not to give you the idea that Virtual World is suffering because they don't have access to one card combos. No, no, no. These listings are simply to showcase to you how the current meta is dominated by exceptionally consistent decks. And these decks are not just exceptionally consistent, they have a myriad of plays. They have a variety of options, and their one card combos and their consistency allows them to have access to hand traps and stun cards and floodgates. If you look at Prankits, for instance, a lot of players are simply utilizing them as a one card combo for butler setup or washer setup. And with this in mind, they run a lot of traps, a lot of hand traps. The same is said for Trap Tri Brigades, and that deck is entirely made up of the fact that they can utilize Revolt and they can utilize Trap Deck and so on and so forth. For, say, a deck like Dragon Links, they have a lot of options. They have a ton of extenders and they can break boards quite easily. Virtual World, it's not quite like that. Sure, Virtual World has the ability to break boards quite significantly, but the problem with Virtual World is the issue of hand advantage. If you've ever played Virtual World, you're probably going to understand where I'm coming from. But if you haven't, let me try to explain it for you in simpler terms. Both King Long and Xuan Wu require discards to gain their effects. And you might think to yourself, wow, that's not a lot. And well, you'd be wrong. That is a lot, especially when you consider that factor with the thing of virtual world requiring two card combos. So essentially, three parts of a hand in the beginning of the first turn, if one of them is a hand trap, the virtual player would need two of those cards to be virtual cards that they can utilize immediately to gain access to their deck. And if you haven't played Virtual World, you probably remember the horror of Virtual World being exceptionally consistent and exceptionally disruptive and having a massive box, extra deck toolbox. But the deck is really, really fragile right now. And it's not just the opponent hindering you with, say, Ash or Gamma, which is very effective, by the way, against them. Ashing or gamming Lulu can sometimes end a virtual player's turn, but these things are not entirely what a virtual player fears. They fear bricking. The issue with virtual is that sometimes you need so many cards in your hand for just to play your deck that you can't afford to see cards like Ash or so many hand taps in your hand because you don't have access to your deck if you have too many hand traps in your hand. I'm just going to give you a simple idea, okay? If a virtual player has access to King Long and Lulu on their first turn hand, that hand is exceptionally fragile. And the major reason for this is that if the opponent simply ashes the Lulu, the entire turn ends. There is no other deck like that in the current meta. There is no other deck that loses like that. Every other deck has an exceptional amount of extenders. They have an exceptional amount of support outside of their deck alone. Dealings are just a mismatch of extenders. Invoke Dogmatika Shaddoll, they have Invoked Dogmatika Shaddoll, three of the most consistent engines in the game. Prankage are just consistency. That's all their deck is. Virtual does not have that luxury. They don't have the luxury of having the ability to hold so many hand taps. And you might think it's small, but it is not. Playing this deck can sometimes be a pain because sometimes you could actually see too many hand taps to win. And that could make your hand exceptionally fragile and it becomes exceptionally frustrating. A lot of people point to the fact that Virtual World has an extremely extensive toolbox. And that is kind of true. Virtual World specializes in rank 3s, rank 6, rank 9s, level 3s, level 6 and level 9 synchros. But an extra toolbox is only really good when you can actually access that toolbox. Without competent access to that toolbox, without assurable ways to get to that toolbox, without proper means and exceptionally consistent means to get to that toolbox essentially becomes nothing. They produce nothing. Having cards such as Vermilion, Color Dragon, Crystal Wing, Zolkin, Kaliga, Dragoon, Utopic Beyond, Fan, Fortune, Zeus, all of these cards are amazing. But if you can't get to them, how good are they? Right? So that's just one tidbit of why Virtual World sucks. I already discussed the other top meta decks, but I think I need to elaborate a little bit more on those decks in comparison to Virtual World. Virtual World loses to almost all those decks, by the way, except for maybe Prankets. The Prankets matchup is kind of beneficial for Virtual Worlds, primarily due to Chuchi and King Long existing and them being able to somehow maybe get around the Butler setup. Double Raigeki is amazing, but King Long negating and Chuchi popping is quite powerful. But against decks like Dragon Link, Invoke Dogmatika, Shaddoll, Tri-Brigade, that's simply not enough sometimes. That is simply not good enough for the deck to succeed. And it's rather unfortunate. I love this deck. I want this deck to get better. And I've been trying to make this deck work since the beginning of the format. And when I say the beginning of the format, I mean I was there on day one on Dueling Book testing builds, seeing what would work. And on the first day, the deck felt absolutely amazing. I was having interactive duels out the wazoo from here to Timbuktu, but the issues slowly crept on when the players I faced got better and better. I slowly started to realize that my extra deck toolbox was worthless. because I couldn't access it. I slowly started to realize that my deck was lackluster because I needed to card combos, whereas my opponent could go off of basically anything. A Dragon Link player can go off Simply Safer. They could go off Baby Metal Dragon. They have so many extenders, it's insane. In Vogue Domatica Shadol, there is actually a very specific way you have to play Virtual World, even with the perfect setup, to beat Invoke Domatica Shadol. That's how insane the matchup is. That's how impossible it can get. The deck is just pain. And that doesn't mean that the deck is entirely obscure. No, we are not Rhydron level. We are not Cyber Dragons. That is not Virtual World. But Virtual World, it's down there. It's just barely considered meta. And that's sad. That's sad to see it. They go from tier 1 all the way to the trenches. And a lot of people, they are celebrating this. They're pissing on Virtual World's grave. And I can understand why. People did not like the VFD format. And I was kind of one of them. A lot of combo decks couldn't even work in that format. And it's understandable. Even Renova players are surely welcoming its death. But it's kind of sad, don't you think? A deck just going away so fast. Just disappearing. But anyway, that's a story for another time. Maybe they succeed in the future if Konami decides to give them the rank 9 XZs that they need. But Konami is kind of lackluster in that department. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe. But it doesn't really matter. I most so like discussing. So if you want to, please discuss in the comments below. Enjoy the rest of your day.